Hi, welcome to Real Time Recorded. It's week 34. Zias, I know where you were this week because I saw you. Happy week 34.
Happy week 34 and happy Zoom week, right? We had a lot of, I think we were both there live, as we've been saying for a while, live events are back. So that was good to see.
Actually, Zoom week started before we were there. Zoom week started on Monday because they announced their quarter. What were your thoughts on that?
I actually like it when vendors do their events after earnings. A lot of times they do it before earnings and they can't tell us anything. So, when you look at the numbers that they put up, I guess it's a bit of a two-sided coin. On one side, they posted numbers, sales of 1.1 billion, which is 20 million short of
billion. It's like $1 billion.
Who would have thought so? They're a $4 billion run rate company, right? But that was light, about 20 million short of Wall Street expectations. They did blame the war in Ukraine, financial exchange issues. Because the stronger dollar and things like that. So, and weak online sales, which I've been kind of expecting as well. Of bigger concern, though, their guidance was light, right? They guided to 1.09 to 1.1 billion for Q3. Wall Street was expecting 1.15. Full year guidance was 4.38 to 4.39. That was well short of the 4.53 billion the street was expecting. But I do think that if you look inside the numbers, enterprise growth of 27%, 4 million phones. They had a couple of really big six-figure phone customers as well. It does show that the company's in transition. So the top line numbers are one thing, but I do think you need to look inside the numbers to really understand what's going on in Zoom.
The 4 million phones is actually a pretty significant milestone, particularly since it was 3 million phones, I think like a quarter ago. So we're seeing a significant acceleration there, which we'll talk about more in this as we get into the Zoom Perspectives content. But the Wall Street was not kind. I mean, Wall Street basically ran for the hills. Growth is over. I personally, we've talked about this with a few other companies right now. I think the only company that's actually raised their guidance was Five9. Most companies are lowering their guidance. I think Zoom is actually going to be okay because if people don't return to work, then they're going to use the video, which is the assumption that that assumption is over, but it may not be over. But if they do return to work, then everyone's going to need phones, and they're selling phones like crazy. And so I think that they're actually well positioned for where they're at right now. They're sandbagging, lowering their guidance. What do you think?
Well, I think they are going through transition. I think I've been expecting for a while to see the drop off of the online business. Right? The one thing, Dave, we're not doing hybrid birthday parties. We're not doing hybrid church services, right? So those are back in person. We don't need Zoom in our personal lives to let us entertain ourselves anymore. So, but they have pivoted this company largely to business, right? And I think that's an important distinction. So, but you're right. Wall Street hasn't been good. Even at the top line though, 8% on a $4 billion run rate, that's a big number, right? So, that's they're bigger. I mean, their growth is bigger than some of the smaller UCaaS vendors.
So the Zoom market cap is actually lower than it was pre-pandemic, and their revenue is a lot higher than it was pre-pandemic. And so I think that there's something definitely wrong here with the way Wall Street's reacting. But let's get to the Zoom Perspectives. The Zoom Perspectives was their analyst event that they hosted in San Jose. Actually, it was a hybrid event. The people that were in person were in San Jose, but not everyone was in person. And normally when we talk about hybrid events, we think about the attendees not all being in person. But this was actually, even the host was remote. The host was remote. They had panelists remote. They had a band that was remote. So it was actually, I have to say, probably one of the best implementations of a hybrid event that I've ever seen. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it was well done that way. I thought having the Gary Chestnutis there as the local host, but then having an MC that was actually remote was pretty cool. And actually, the remote band was pretty interesting as well because you could just bring him in when you wanted to and turn him off when you wanted to. So that
I thought it was really interesting the way they had separate monitors for each panelist member, or when they brought in if an analyst had a question, they would bring that person up on a separate monitor. It was actually, we often talk about equity and giving, there's been so much improvements in video technology to give people a better experience. But this is one of the first I mean, this was really well done from an event perspective. It's certainly, I think, raised the bar.
Yeah.
It'll be curious to see how the competitors respond to that. But what were your takeaways? Well, actually, I'll start. I'll start with one of the takeaways. So they started off the event, and they used, I almost kind of cringe every time I hear it because everyone's using it, but they used the platform word a lot. They were leading with the platform. Zoom
tagline.
And it's like, I think Twilio kind of started this whole thing with the CPaaS category and we're a platform, we're not an application. But now every application is suddenly a platform, and I have to say it's a little tiresome, but at the same time I respect it, and I understand and appreciate what they're saying by it, but I don't think it stood out as a differentiator. Your thoughts on platform?
Well, they've been talking about platform for a while, and I do think it ties into what their CFO, Kelly Steckelberg, said in her session, where the goal for Zoom is to become a $10 billion company, and then Eric joked and said, no, it's $15 billion. And there's only 4 software companies that have actually hit that number, Dave, right? Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, and Oracle. And they all have one thing in common. They're platforms, right? But to me, and so you have to be a platform company to hit that number. And to me, they aren't a platform yet. They have all the components of being a platform, right? They got a developer environment, they got APIs and stuff. But to me, you are a full-fledged platform when you've got a bunch of small ISVs out there building apps that run on you, and you don't even have to sell your product, right? How many apps run on Microsoft that you got no choice? You got to buy Microsoft. To run on Oracle, you got to buy Oracle. And so I did like the analogy that I think Ryan Azus used, where he said they want to be the operating system of communications. If they can actually get to that point, then they'll have people building on their stuff without even, that becomes the de facto standard. And so while that's an aspirational goal, I think to call yourself a platform right now, I think it's a little premature.
Well, okay, so there's two. The other side of that is everyone's a platform, so you have to call yourself a platform.
Yeah.
But
nobody's a platform.
I would also say that I had this feeling the whole time during this event that they were holding back, that they weren't sharing their whole story with us, and it's only a few months. I think it's like 2 or 3 months away until Zoomtopia, and they've got some big things brewing, is my impression. I actually don't have this as a fact, but my impression is they got some big things brewing. So I think they're laying this foundation, and what I actually took away from when they say platform, and again, I cringe when I hear platform just because everyone says it. And I got to give, I'm going to give a little hat tip here to the Vonage, right? Because when Vonage bought Nexpo back in 2016, everybody was like really confused about, hey, you're an application, you're not a platform. That's a platform play. What's going on? But that was 2016. In 2022, almost every application provider now is becoming a platform play and building out their SDKs, building out their APIs. And so I think it has to be more than platform. And I feel, although they didn't say it, and you kind of alluded to it with quoting Ryan there, but they're really about a productivity engine or an experience engine. Why do people pick Zoom over other competitors, whatever? They say it's the experience, the user experience, et cetera. And so that's really what they mean. They're building an experience or productivity capability that could extend into other types of things. And I think that's an important differentiation than just an API or SDK. That's not enough. And so I kind of appreciate what they're doing. I kind of want to see what's next. I don't know when we're going to find out, I guess, Zoomtopia. But we do know, they did tell us a little bit of a hint, that one of their priorities is to refocus on Zoom chat.
Yeah.
And I have to say, finally, hello, I think chat has been the killer app of UCaaS. Basically, it goes back to Link. I think when Link came out and really built in persistent messaging, it was really we all knew it was really important. It was changing the way we work. It was changing workflows. Whether you call it team messaging or workstream communications or chat, whatever you want to call it, this concept has really changed the way we work. It's very, very important. And I think it's been kind of, it hasn't received enough attention, the proper attention from the UCaaS industry. Many UCaaS providers only offered it if you bought telephony instead of
Yeah.
making it just enterprise wide.
It was a
I think
feature,
Facebook
not
kind of
the-
changed that with Workplace, and now it's more available. But I think we've seen a lot of innovation in chat. But I think that, I've heard people think that the chat battle is over, that Microsoft won that, and I think that's true today. But I'm not sure it's sustainable. And I think the reason Microsoft largely won that battle so far is because they didn't have any good competition. Cisco had a great competition with Spark, but they lost interest in that. That's another podcast. And then Zoom had a very nice relationship with Slack, and so it's kind of letting Slack do their thing.
Well, Ansible was the first, right? Circuit was the first, and then they disappeared. I do think so. The danger for the industry here, though, is the more embedded Microsoft gets. I've talked to customers about this. Once you have even a few months of data in chat, it's very difficult to decouple because you can't. How do you port those old conversations over to the new system, right? And so that's where the industry right now, if you're going to go compete with Teams, if you really want to sell everything, then you got to make a decision. You're either going to beef up your product and go hard at it now, or you're content with letting Microsoft win the chat and then you provide everything else, all the real time, right? Which is what a lot of the vendors seem to be doing. But I do agree with you. I think it's the killer anchor application in UC.
Yeah, I think Zoom is tightly associated with video, and everything's an add-on to video. Video's in the center of the pie, and then everything else is an add-on. But I think what they're saying and hopefully doing is moving chat to that center of the architecture, the lead app, and everything else adds on to that. And that to me is what you have to do. And I think they hinted that they're going to give it a lot of priority. They haven't really revealed what that means yet. It'll be curious to see where they go.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So,
and I actually think another interesting takeaway that I got, and I've been sort of leaning this way anyways for the last little while, is Zoom Phone's legit, right? They posted a $4 million number and or 4 million seat number, and I know there's some skepticism about that's a real 4 million or not, but it's in the millions now, right? And I know some of the competitive chatter as well. They don't have a full feature set of phone features, but one of the big aha moments I had was when I was talking to a friend of mine who's a law firm CIO, and they're on an old legacy system, and they were looking at they're going to move Zoom Phone, and I asked them why I thought they didn't have enough features to support it legally. He goes, look, Zoom's in 7 of the 10 largest law firms in the U.S., so they have more than enough to support us. And that, when I think about what's the most telephony heavy industry vertical out there, it is legal, right? They live and die with the phone, and so if they can support that, they posted a couple of 125,000 seat wins. If they can support those types of customers, they're here, right? They've arrived in phone, and they're a legit phone vendor, and they're as good as anybody else. Now, with that being said, though, Ring posted 5 billion, Cisco says 6, Zoom says 4. Whoop-de-doo, right? There are over 400 million business desktops, and so if you add up, WebEx and Ring and Zoom and all the other guys, you get to maybe 20 million seats. So the final verdict on who wins the next gen phone war, the cloud phone wars, has yet to be written, and it's wide open. So these are all little tiny baby numbers, Dave. We talked like 4 million. Yeah.
I had a conversation with somebody at Perspectives, not a Zoom person, and they had suggested that it was a big mistake for Zoom to have gotten into phone, and their argument, which I disagree with completely, but their argument was that the multiples in terms of valuation in the phone business are much lower than other SaaS businesses, and so now that Zoom is building up its telephony revenue, that their valuation is going down. It's like he was like, look, I predicted this, and it's completely wrong. But I think what he missed is that every phone vendor is also selling meetings and chat, and so you have to basically offer phone, or you're going to bring in the competitor into your clients, and so I think that's really important that they offer phone. I think they're offering phone very well, and what people don't really fully get, and it always surprises me when people don't get this about Zoom, is that Zoom's superpower is speed of everything, speed of development, speed of market, go to market. So when they, you talk about some other competitors and their numbers. Zoom is leading, or not leading, but 4 million is a very impressive number in just a few years. It's just when Zoom announced, I remember it was right around the time of the pandemic, I think, when Zoom announced that they were getting into telephony, we're like, oh, great, it's going to be 10 years of adding features and adding countries and adding endpoints, and it's just going to be a long thing. But it's like, I think they exceeded everyone's expectations on how quickly they got to where they're at, and I think it's an important thing to do. The other thing about phone is that it's not phone and video, it's basically multimedia communications.
Yes.
And so whether it be chat or whether it be video, or whether it be asynchronous communication like pre-recorded videos or voicemails or telephony, they're looking at this as communications, as an enterprise communications engine, and they're not looking at it as separate workloads. And I think that's also very important.
I actually remember talking to Rowan about that when he was still at Cisco. It's like we were talking about what's the difference between a meeting and a call. Like right now, are we doing a call or a meeting? Right? If we add, it's a call, and we add one more person, now it's a meeting. Right? They're the same thing. And so you're right. The underlying technology to power calling the meeting is the same thing. It's just delivered in a different way.
So let's we're running out of time here, but let's get into a little bit about CCAS, because they announced in their quarter that CCAS was actually selling a lot better than I think anyone was expecting.
Yeah, I don't know how to interpret that. Were they not expecting it to sell well, or did they just blow the doors
brand new
off?
product, yeah.
Yeah, and it's an interesting. Obviously, every UCAS vendor wants to have CCAS. Although it's also interesting that not every CCAS vendor wants to have UCAS, but that's probably a different podcast. But clearly, I think on the UC side, we've talked about this before, where you got to keep adding features in order to just hold your price point fixed. Where with CCAS, we do see the ARPUs going up. We see the number of seats expanding, and instead of charging $30 a month at the high end, you can get $200 a month at the high end, right? So why wouldn't you want to be in this space? And they are clearly they're a late entrant, right? They're years late, but based on customer feedback, I think they're going to have a legitimate shot to compete for this. As you talked about with Zoom, people like Zoom. People like the Zoom experience. And if we can meet happy, we can call happy, right? Why can't we contact center happy? And if they can build, that kind of Zoom experience, and agents like it, and contact centers managers like it, I think, again, like the telephony market, which is just in its infancy, if you add up all the contact center seats that are in the cloud compared to the on-prem one, there's a lot of runway yet to be had. And so, I think this is going to be a rising tide, and I think they're one of the boats that get lifted with it.
So one of the things they said, which surprised me, was they said something like, I don't remember the number, 150 new features added to the CCAS in the past quarter or past few months. The product was launched in February. It was really kind of launched at Enterprise Connect in March, but it's a brand new product, and they're I talk about that Zoom innovation engine. When they turn that on, things start happening pretty quickly. So they're adding a lot of features to this. They put up customers on their customer panel that they were all using or experimenting or piloting the contact center and saying good things about it. They're doing some interesting things there in contact center, and again, I think it's exceeding a lot of people's expectations about how fast that's being developed. But what I want to highlight, though, is, to me, most people, when they talk about contact center, they're talking about customer engagement or customer service, and your call is important to us, blah 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 blah. I think Zoom is doing a slightly different twist, and they really seem to be more focused around intelligent multimedia routing, and that, again, kind of what we were just saying about phone and video and chat, it's part of this multimedia engine. And so one of the things they talked about, for example, was using Zoom kiosk mode, maybe as a virtual receptionist or something, and you want to push a button. You talk about the receptionist, you talk to a remote receptionist, hey, I'm here to visit somebody, but it could be something else. Maybe you want to call maintenance, maybe you want to call IT, maybe you want to call something else. And these are going to be routed and queued to the appropriate resource. And this was something that Microsoft struggled with for years. They didn't do traditional hunt groups. They didn't really understand intelligent routing. They didn't really have a way of doing that very well with the Link and Skype for Business years. And so I think that Zoom is starting off very much focused around intelligent multimedia routing, which I think is very important and actually a bit of a differentiator from a lot of what the contact center companies are talking about.
Yeah, they're not just trying to serve your typical agent, right? they're trying to take it, which is good, right? I mean, you got to have a different approach if you're going to compete with this. But you know, I do think I think they're going to surprise some people in the space. I think we'll see them grow. Maybe not as fast as they did with phone, but because the market, I think, has a lot of really strong vendors in it. But you know, I'd be curious to see, you know, a year from now where they're at in contact center.
So, last question before we wrap this up. You know, with their valuation as low as it is, do you think they might get acquired?
I don't think so. I mean, I suppose everything's acquirable, right? And maybe Microsoft admits that we don't do real time very well and brings them in and combines them with Teams. But there's only a handful of companies that could acquire them, even at this valuation. Oracle's always the curious one, right? Because they're big. They always dance around communications, but they've never really been in communications. So
I actually think it would be pretty tough for a company to acquire Zoom because you know, you'd have to get shareholder approval, and you're basically asking them to vote that some other company will increase their value more than Eric will.
Yeah.
And that's going to be tough for shareholders. I think that Eric's got a pretty proven track record, and I want to actually recognize and thank Eric for being so personally active at the analyst event. A lot of CEOs don't feel it's worth their effort to come to these things, and he was visible, accessible, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen him live too, in person. So
very good.
So,
well,
all right. Well, that wraps up week 34, and I guess we'll see what the future holds, whether we're back for week 35 or a future week.
All right. Thank you.
Right.